I'm at work taking a break now. I was on the way to work when I did part one of this part one and part two series of episodes on, what's it on? My brain is fried. I've just been in front of the computer for about 8 hours. We know our history. That's what it was about. I spoke the first episode on the way to work, and now I'm taking a break at the end of the day. The part one that I did this morning on We Know Our History made a comparison between a place like Australia, where we tend to not trust our memories. When we're thinking about our history, and this is European Australians, and we tend to not trust our oral history. We tend to trust in our records. Whereas other cultures, like Indigenous Australians, or Indigenous Australia, they tend to trust their oral sources, for example, and their memories. And in the previous episode, I said that neither one nor the other is necessarily a better system. They're both histories, just different types of history. And each has got its advantages and its disadvantages. Take Ethiopia, for example. There are huge periods that, we would call dark ages, no written records. Now, I've met Ethiopians, for example, who have, this is the advantage of trusting in what you've been told by your parents, who have been told histories by their parents, and it's been passed down through the ages. Now, there are huge periods in Ethiopia where there's no records. Some of those periods are really recent, actually. For example, during the current civil war between Ethiopia and Tigray, there's bugger all record taking going on. Internet blackout, all that sort of stuff. Little bits and pieces are escaping of massacres and things like that, but not much record taking. Whereas Australia in wars, we record everything. Every single person that even gets injured, let alone killed, everyone who attends every battle and all that sort of thing. Australia is into record keeping. A place like Ethiopia isn't. They just send thousands of people into an area and nobody knows how many went in and how many came out and how many they killed when they got there. There's no records of that sort of stuff. Pretty much in any battle in history in Ethiopia, as far as I can tell. Like you Google a battle that Australia was involved in during any of the wars we've been involved in, and you get huge amounts of detail. You Google some of the most major battles that Ethiopia was involved in, and they say, and the Wikipedia page or whatever says there was a big battle there, the emperor got killed, something between 5,000 and 5,000 people maybe died, no idea. Actually, we don't know anything about what happened. Everyone just disappeared into a valley, and then we don't even know how many came back. We've got no record. Now, the thing is, when you record your history as diligently as Australia does, that sounds like a good idea. But of course, you're recording your errors on what you think is happening in your time as well. And you also are recording the lies. So when you go to your records, you're not reading what actually happened in your past in a culture like Australia. You're reading what people said happened at the time. And that's a little bit like reading Julius Caesar's records of his triumphs. In Gaul, you have to take into account that he was marketing himself at the same time. And Australia's a bit like that too, a lot like that, So when we read our history, it is a history. It's a history of what we thought was true, which is a very important thing to know. A history of what we thought was true at the time, written by people in those times, and that's important. And it's also a history of the lies that people wanted to tell at that time and in those times, and also a history of all the things that people said in those times where those people were eager to tell the truth. All right, so that's what you've got. So what do we know about our history? We don't know what happened. We know what people said happened. And often that's pretty good, especially when it comes to people videoing stuff and taking photos. That's not bad, is it? Like if there's a photo of, I think we've got some footage of almost a full game of footy in about 1908. I can say that football players wore very long shorts in 1908, at least in this game. And you might say, if you come from another culture, oh, myth and fantasy, you've got no, myth and fantasy. And I say, well, we've got the recording. Someone recorded it, someone videoed it, just after video cameras were invented. All right. See, that's pretty good evidence of history, and most people are happy with that. But at the same time, in that same era, for example, and many times since and many times before, other places, something might have happened, and everyone in that culture today knows what happened at that point. Let's say there's a great battle or something. Everyone knows what happened in that battle in 1800 something, but there's absolutely no records of that. What they know is a different type of knowledge, and this is that epistemology business. What they know is what they've been told as has been handed down the line. And that sort of history, where there's no records in history, that's kind of a good history in a way. It can be a useful history. So if there was a great battle in the 1800s at some time, in some other culture where they don't record the details of their battles. We in Australia do record the details of our battles, and sometimes the people making the logs of what has been happening in those battles are lying to cover up war crimes and all sorts of things, of course. But the history we know is the history of what they said happened, which is actually a bit better and a bit worse than no records kept at all. Now, what's better about it? Well, some of the lies slip through, but that's what's bad about it. And what's good about it was sometimes you can see through those lies, because sometimes you get lots of soldiers keeping diaries, and you can put them all together and then reconstruct the picture. And then you can sometimes charge people with war crimes later. Australian history is not necessarily better, but it's better recorded. All right. Now, these are the places where there's been a big battle, and there's no records whatsoever as to the details of that battle. Anything from 500 people to 10,000 people went into a valley, and they slaughtered anything between, maybe they slaughtered 10 people, maybe they slaughtered 40 million people, we don't know. Something between 10 and 40 million people they slaughtered. And then we don't even know how many came back out of that valley. Something between 5 people and 20,000 people. I forget how many people went in, but it's really rubbery. Now, with the Australian history that I was talking about, because there's so many records with respect to that history, there's an air of uncertainty about it because we know that another soldier's diary could pop up, which smashes what we thought was our history. So our history is actually a little bit more fragile. So let's say in a battle Australia took part in World War I, for example. We've got it all written down, at this battle and that battle, this is roughly what happened, in pretty good detail. But we know that a diary could pop up, which changes that account of that battle. But there are other cultures who've got the benefit of really knowing that no stray diary is ever going to pop up from a battle that's gone past. And those cultures are able to draw up, based on what they've been told, a rock solid account of what happened in that battle, and know that the details of that battle that they are writing down are never going to be shot down in flames. They are set in stone. And in history, that's been really valuable for a lot of cultures in building a really strong self-identity and all that sort of stuff. I don't know whether you're from a different country, whoever you are listening to this, but you might have a whole 500-year period or a 1,000-year period where there's no records at all. None. You might not even know who your kings were in that time, or your emperors. You've got stuff written on stone as to who all the kings were, but how do you know that someone didn't make up all those names? Trying to reconstruct a history because, that person, after 1,000 years of dark ages or something, knew that they needed a history for social cohesion and all that sort of stuff. So they reconstructed a set of kings, some of the names were right, some were made up, whatever. But the point is, in those countries, you can you can consider a whole 500 to 1,000 year period, and you can pretty much decide that was an era of great peace where everybody lived in harmony together, when actually, most likely, there was a war every 20 years, maybe every 10 years that whole time, and people were slaughtered right throughout. But the point is, there's no record of that. So you are able to say, let's say a war breaks out right now in such a country. Pick a country, any country. A country where they don't keep records. A country where the government is secretive. Right. And I've heard this said, look, I've heard it said about about Ethiopia. They're in a battle at the moment. People of Ethiopia, we used to live in such harmony. Why are we killing each other? Now, all the tribes used to live in harmony, and I sort of, and you're moved to think when, and the people say, well, between 1500 and 1700, all the people, all the cultures lived in harmony. Muslims lived side by side with Christians, and there was harmony across the land. You sort of think, I know how you know that, or how you can know that. It's because there's no records in that era. Maybe not that era, but some era. Pick an era, any era, where there's no record keeping. And when a person decides, or is told by his or her parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, oral history and all that sort of stuff, that a certain period of 300 years, say, was a period of peace and harmony, that is locked in stone. Oh, hello. Sorry about that. No, not at all. Cleaner. I'll get out of here in a second. That is locked in stone much more solidly than anything like that can be locked in stone in Australia. Because if we were to say in Australia that we had, a period of tranquility, all that sort of stuff, there's much more risk of records popping up saying that's not the case. Like soldiers, noble soldiers. If we say our soldiers are noble, there's a very good chance that some soldier's diary is going to pop up and say, my sergeant, during such and such war, he's got medals all over him, and everyone thinks he's a good bloke, but I saw him murder people. I saw him massacre civilians. That could crop up. Whereas in other cultures that take no records, write no diaries and all that sort of stuff, if you've got a hero soldier from the past in your culture who always acted nobly, you're not going to get a diary popping up that turns that guy into a bastard. So our heroes in Australia are always at risk of ending up bastards, but heroes in other cultures where they don't take records of battles, for example, their heroes are heroes forever. So look, I'm going to get out of here. I've got to keep going. That'll do.